What's up, Kansas City? I'm your host, Glenn Bryan Frizzell. Today we are taping in the historic 18th and Vine Jazz District at the Lincoln Building, home of Cascade Media Group. Today's special guest, I have the pleasure of sitting next to this guy. He's a gentleman who I consider to be a history hero. I do not have to say Black History hero because we are no longer in Black History Month, but he definitely is an African-American figure whose legacy will long outlive our mortality. He's contributed to our culture and our state of being. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's give a warm what's up Kansas City welcome to Kansas State Senator David Haley.
Thank you. What's up?
What's going on?
All right.
Thank you, Howard Bison. I'm going to put that out front.
Right. Thank you. And thank you for the generous introduction.
Welcome to the program. Let's talk a little bit about the Kansas State Senate. I read in an article that you guys were still in session on Sunday. What's going on in the Senate floor? What important legislative work was accomplished during this last session?
Thank you for asking, and again, thank you for having me on. I appreciate your patience and helping us get together and talk here from the Lincoln Building about some of the issues in and around the community. The Kansas legislature at this point in time has the distinction of being led by a conservative wing of the Republican Party, and what we were debating in an almost unprecedented fashion over this last weekend, Saturday and Sunday included, was the public school finance responding to a ruling by our state Supreme Court in what's called the Gannon decision. The Gannon decision, about a month and a half ago, ruled that we do have unequal schools in Kansas, and that those schools are unequal due to financial abilities that are received by the individual districts. And this was the debate in the legislature that kept us into extra innings.
Right. And how did that debate resolve?
Well, depends who you talk to. From some viewpoint, because the Kansas legislature did agree to infuse an additional roughly $129 million into our public school system, and also to offer a small tax break to many property owners. Many felt that it was a win, and a responsive win to the financial dictates that were given by the Supreme Court. Some of us feel that at what cost, and the cost was inclusive of the tenure of teachers that was stripped away. A teacher that could be in any particular district may or may not have his or her contract renewed for no discernible reason. And we who feel that teachers do a tremendous job in attempting to educate many times in difficult circumstances our students, that they should be afforded some protections, some equal protections, and not be left to the whims of a superintendent or even to a principal at any given school.
Certainly. Teachers are the most important figures in our community who often go without getting deserved credit. Can we talk a little bit about some other issues? I don't know if they were present during this debate on the Senate floor, but I've read before that you're an advocate for medical marijuana.
Yes.
And that you've also spoken out against, what is the exact terminology I'm looking for, pump deficiency when you go to the gas station and you're overcharged because it takes a while to register on the gas machine there.
Yes.
And it's already charging you while you're filling up.
Yes. Well,
just a couple of issues.
All right. Sure. And thank you for recalling some of those. You know, I feel like I'm only here in this position for a limited amount of time. Although Kansas does not have term limits for our state legislators, we all are only in the spaces where we are for a moment, and working hard to make the best of those moments and to do what we can to ease the plight of whatever our community circumstances might be is something that I hope is incumbent on all of us, wherever we are, whether we're in media or government, whether we're a teacher. We all want to do our part to make our community and our states hopefully a better place for succeeding generations. And part of the thing we have to do is to pay attention. We have to pay close attention to what's happening around us. And too often in our community, I noticed that the pumps were jumping, that after we had paid or were paying through a credit or debit card our hard money to fill up our gas tanks, that when we started,
That's crucial.
it didn't start at zero. It would start somewhere, we saw one as high as 60 cents. And several places said, well, that's just the way the pump is. And so my question was, being diligent, as I hope we all are, to pay close attention, well, if that's the way it is, why is it doesn't start at negative 60 cents? Why is it that the consumer, the person purchasing the gas, was overpaying? Some of us drive around, I'm one of them, and look at how much the gallons are.
Gas is not cheap.
And wherever the lowest pump is,
Yeah.
that's the one I normally go to fill up.
Yes,
Well,
certainly compelled to comparison shop.
Absolutely. But if it's starting you at a higher rate, you have to deduct for however many gallons of gas, that particular
That
amount.
comes out of the consumer's pocket.
It does. So I was glad that there was some vigilance paid to that, and people are now paying closer attention. On the issue, several issues I've introduced since I've been in that I've been known for, again, trying to ease the general condition of our communities while we're in. As a Bison, my having coming out of Howard Law, and as you've been there at Howard, and
We're going to talk
undergrad was
about
Morehouse.
We'll talk about Howard a little
All
bit.
right. Well, good. I'm always happy to do that, and all of our HBCUs, of which I'm very proud. I just think that when we look at the issues that cause a disparate imbalance for our community, where does it come from? Why are we disproportionately as a people locked up? Even though we may be a certain percentage of a population in every state, in Missouri and Kansas, black people are disproportionately, overly represented, if you will, in our justice system and in our jails and in our prisons. Part of that has been the possession of marijuana. That's a disproportionate amount. Now I started thinking, especially when there's been this national debate, Glenn, why is it that we were disproportionately represented for possession crimes for marijuana? And during this national debate and other states implementing not only medical marijuana, but now even recreational, I feel that it is a crime to have created a crime for the possession of a non-lethal substance that in and of itself is not causing any death, any overdose, and that is only adding to our prison populations. And so I did introduce the bill to make sure Kansas, at some point in time, though it won't in 2014, ramps up to the national debate and causes to bring some sanity and some parity to our criminal justice code.
We certainly are monitoring Colorado, where a lot of that legislation has been introduced and successfully passed. Senator Haley, I know this next question wasn't on the agenda, but I was compelled to ask by our executive producer, trying to correlate it. It's about a minute question, so listen. And it's about African American leadership today. This week we are celebrating the Civil Rights Act that President Lyndon B. Johnson signed 50 years ago. With the Civil Rights Summit, where African American leaders, I shouldn't just say African American, but leaders, civil rights activists, former presidents are meeting at Lyndon B. Johnson's library in Texas. President Carter said this yesterday during his speech. We've fallen short in a lot of ways. You know, we still have gross disparity between black and white people on employment, the quality of education. We kind of accept self-congratulations about the wonderful 50th anniversary, which is wonderful. But we feel like, you know, Lyndon Johnson did it. We don't have to do anything anymore. I think too many people are at ease with the still existing disparity. Senator Haley, I've been reading an autobiography by Frank Savage, who is Howard University Board of Trustees Chairman Emeritus, investment banker who was one of the first African Americans to be successful in that field. And he talked about how preparation and opportunity led him to that success. We look at the civil rights giants, my generation, we look back at Martin Luther King, Roy Wilkins, John Lewis, Leon Jordan, Malcolm X, Whitney Young, and we look today and we really don't see any historic, heroic figure. There isn't any one group or one organization speaking for African American rights about education and employment. the leadership today fragmented in our communities? Have we moved on up like the Jeffersons, moved out of Compton like the Banks, and not reached back and helped our fellow person, the next generation, succeed?
That's a complex question, and thank you for not preparing me for it.
On the spot here.
Well, let's see how I do extemporaneously. No, thank you.
We shall see.
I do mean that, Glenn. First and foremost, we do recognize that civil rights. In fact, I did introduce a resolution in the Senate commemorating the 50th anniversary, which will be April 11th of this year, the 50-year anniversary for the civil rights bill having been signed by President Johnson, and looking at some of the highlights: income disparity, employment disparity, and why the civil rights bill, even in public accommodations, looking back 50 years ago, where we could not, as a country, sit down based on the color of our skin at the same lunch counter across the country, realizing that public accommodations, public housing, and access to all areas were aired to every American, again, irrespective of race, especially of race or of religion or of creed. And many people have pointed to, since that time, that part of the problems that you now highlight, when we look back 50 years and we don't have a focus or core focus for where our leadership comes from, what organizations are in place. And those organizations that were active to bring the Civil Rights Act of '64 into being are legion. The SCLC, NAACP, CORE, SNCC, I mean, Urban League, and there were a host of them. And they too had several leaders then. And so to say that we are now fragmented and there is no core leadership, I do believe there are some. Recently I was interviewed about succeeding Benjamin Todd Jellis for NAACP, and the jury's still out as we speak. And I was flattered that I was even mentioned. The challenges are there in front of us.
That's quite an accomplishment, quite an honor.
I was honored.
Quite a
I am
deserved
honored.
honor.
No, I'm flattered to even be in the dialogue and the discussion, because I'm certain, I know for a fact, that there are people who can serve in that capacity or far better than a David Haley could. And I would like to see him or her emerge soon. Getting back to your question, and it's a question that I think succeeds to a distinct generational or intergenerational tie. Where do we find the enthusiasm, the necessity in a fully now or somewhat fully integrated society to underscore the importance of our institutions, of our Lincoln buildings, of our HBCUs, and how do we succeed that to, again, a subsequent generation who feels that all of those battles that are fought have been won. And so in answer to your question, the short answer is it's going to take leadership across the board to instill a sense of purpose and pride in what we have to a next generation or generations, because we as a community have somehow integrated. We've moved on up, if you will, as you were saying. We've moved to Bel Air almost entirely and have left many of our institutions.
Baldwin Hills.
Yes. Yeah.
Post-generation Bel Air. Oh, David Haley, I would like to ask you this next question, and then we're going to wrap up this portion of the interview. We only have 15 minutes, and I'll come back and we'll do the remaining, not too long, maybe 4 or 5 more questions. Social media, the event of social media. Senator Haley, what role do you see social media playing in the creation or the emergence of the next generation of youthful young leaders?
Well, I've changed with the time. You know, we've had many mediums that have helped us to come through. You know, the history of our history, Glenn, I think, has been very much appreciated through the ability to communicate. I mean, from time immemorial within the African American community, and before that within the African community, the drum and the communication, the ability to convey a thought or a message across a distance is not alien to our community. Actually, it goes back for time immemorial. And so now we're only in another phase of that. We're in a new phase of that. We're in a phase where we can be on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram in a moment to convey to another or to others where we are, what our state of mind is, what our presence is. We've had everything from the good and the bad conveyed in a split second. And so I think, getting back to your previous question, it's important for us to identify those core values that are appreciated and have been appreciated by our generations, and utilize social media how and where we might to establish and to reestablish core values. And I would hope that we would use them for the benefit of social thought and of community progression.
I'd like to thank you, Senator Haley. This concludes part 1 of our interview. Check out more video online at www.whatsupkansascity.net. We'll be right back. Stay tuned for part 2 with social activist, band leader here, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Glenn.
CMG wants you to always remember, the victory we call success goes to the best prepared. When you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself.